When Medilo Swamp Walks. Living on the edge of Medilo Swamp is perilous, they say, but I find it hard to believe. Hard to believe they're going to abandon an entire planet because of one, albeit very large, piece of undesirable real estate. It's not the swamp itself, they tell me, but the creatures within, the will-o'-wisps, stingers, bloodbirds and lily dragons. Lily dragons sound more beautiful than dangerous. Or so I thought, until the night the swamp walked. Once every 5 decades the 3 moons reach conjunction in their fullest lunar phase. Just once. But it is enough. The colonists' research team had been at the height of excitement for the last month, tuning instruments, preparing diaries, recording everything that moved, breathed, grew, recording the fullness of swamp water and the changes in its composition as the lunar drag pulled new compounds from below. And that night, that glorious, terrifying night, the swamp walked. Its waters sparkled like mercury touched with amber, reflecting the lights of a dozen will-o'-wisps, highlighting the petals of several restlessly moving swarms of water blooms, making the gathered reed stems shiver. At first we did not notice the swamp, because on the lowland plains between the village and the swamp edge, the floating cacti were coming into bloom, their scent and savour drawing creatures from the hills around us and bringing birds flocking to perch, until every rooftop, washing line, observation post, defensive wall was decorated in balls of multicoloured plumage, like Christmas with feathers. Predators came too. High above the flocks and herds soared birds of prey. Settling onto rocks in a kind of truce came the smaller flying lizards. Prowling to the very edge of the cacti fields came the great cats and the silent mountain wolves. All eyes were on the cacti pods, but not one creature ventured among them. The scientists, for once, took their cue from nature and their orders from the security team. There were too many predators about, and advanced medical support was too far away to save anyone's life. Death was a suitable deterrent. At dusk, the pods began to rise, and still nothing moved. The creatures tensed, yes, but they did not move from their places. The water-based male pods surfaced first, shooting swiftly into the sky, reaching heights of 4 to 6 meters, and then they opened their outer leaves, releasing the strong, sharp scent of cacti spice into the air. The beasts shifted restlessly in place, and then the land-based female pods lifted from the ground, their petals slowly unfurling, a softer scent curling out to mingle with the spice. Not a single creature moved, until most of the female pods had reached 2 meters and started to release golden pink mist into the air. Spores, millions of them, slowly rising. The male pods exploded, throwing more spore high into the air. The rising female seed would meet the slowly descending male seed, and germination would commence. The mass explosion was the signal the creatures were waiting for, and the herbivores surged forward in a rumble of hooves and skitter of paws and claws. They jostled further and further onto the stream-riddled plain, snatching at the slowly falling female pods and bending their necks to seek out the cacti ground forage. The waiting flocks sprang from their perches in a thunderous roar of feathers, some to settle in the furthest reaches of the plains, and others to dive and swoop amidst the germinating spore. The predators gave the herds time to settle and the flocks time to establish a feeding pattern. When they moved, so did the swamp, and that was when the settlers discovered just how dangerous and varied the creatures of Medilo truly were. The will-o'-wisps hovered in clouds around downed herd beasts or struggling flyers. Bloodbirds took their meals from the diving, darting spore swallows, or settled in clouds over larger beasts to feed. Stingers flew or skittered across the water to engulf creatures of all sizes and leave skeletons behind. The reed beds showed themselves to be trolls, and as carnivorous as any lion. And the dragons? The dragons had legs, and could stalk the land as well as the swamp pools. Lilies are indeed beautiful, but none of us will ever view them as safe again. The feeding frenzy continued long after dusk had melted into night, and the infrared equipment earned back its cost in harvested information. The surviving cacti spore descended at dawn, settling on soil enriched by blood and nutrient-saturated water from the swamp. By that time, the survivors had retreated back to their homes in the surrounding hills, and the creatures of Medilo had returned to their homes within its borders. Although shaken, the colonists' governance let us stay. Medilo, after all, had borders.